The Graphic Histories Podcast.
I got bit by a radioactive bug. I tried an experimental drug. Went up for a stroll on a gamma testing range. I found an enchanted hurricane. I made a serum that made me small. I modified the serum so it would make me tall. Radioactive isotope in my eyes. Dying alien helped me accessorize. I gained the proportion and strength of a spider. Now I'm invincible and I can fly. I lost my sight, my other senses were heightened. I'm gonna put on my pajamas and go fight crime.
Hey, and welcome to the Graphic Histories Podcast. My name is André, and I'm your host. Big thanks to Uka Lamach for our theme song, Superpowers. And big thanks to you, gentle listener, for tuning in once again to another fun-filled, action-packed show. This time our guest is Geof Isherwood, former Marvel Comics artist, currently working on some indie comics, which we discuss. He also does storyboard and design work for films, various films, some surprising ones and some fun ones, and some related to comic books as well, which we will talk about in this conversation. But in the meantime, I hope things are going well in your part of the world, that it's not too COVID-y, if that's a word I can use, and the weather's holding out okay. I mean, I'm in rural Nova Scotia, up there in Canada, and we had a rash of a few storms recently, a lot of ice, a lot of snow. So it's been a bit of hectic getting all that cleared away so that you can drive your car around and do stuff. I struggle often to discuss things like this in the show because I really hate the misconception that Canada is some frozen tundra, and if you don't live here, that is what you think. However, I often tell people, like Americans or such, and not to assume that all Americans understand what Canada's like, but that if you know New York, you know Nova Scotia. I mean, the weather in New York is very similar to here. It gets snow in the winter, it gets rain, it gets ice, it gets sleet, all that stuff. Boston too. We get it here. We're just a little further north in Nova Scotia than you guys. Not by a lot, but a little bit. So, the seasons are about the same. So it was a real honor talking to Geof, and in my life, obviously, we had some great feedback on the past two episodes featuring David Cutler. David also was a guest on the other podcast I do with David Scalehorn. And I still pronounce his name wrong. My God, I'm sorry, Davin. I mostly pronounce it correctly. I know he listens to the show. This time I didn't again. It's weird. It's like this weird thing in the back of my brain that always pronounces it correctly when he's around. But for some reason, when he's not, it just doesn't click. Anyway, I am so sorry, Davin. But so Dave was on that show with us. We talked about X-Men Days of Future Past Part 1 from the X-Men anime series. It was a lot of fun. It was a great talk. You should definitely check out that show. It's called X-Rated, the X-Men Animated Review Podcast. We have some fun guests coming up, some other guest stars that have been connected to the show coming in future episodes, and it's going to be a blast. Normally I have one on a Tuesday night. However, I'm recording this on that night because Davin is moving, so he does not have the internet yet, and he's unable to do the show, so we're going to hold it off for a week before we get that explosive conclusion. On the nerd front, I've been watching Peacemaker. Friggin' loving that show. It is amazing. And I mean, I've talked on this show before about how much I truly love James Gunn's Suicide Squad film. I would put it up there, top 5 superhero movies of all time. It's in there for me. And the show really carries some of the themes of that show forward. Broken people that have a shot at redemption, and that even the worst of us, or the people that are looked down the most of us as a society, have value. And it's interesting watching a kind of reverse story. I mean, a lot of these dark anti-hero stories go from a guy that gets pushed too far and gets revenge and becomes a killer. However, the show is kind of the opposite. It's like you're watching a killer learn humanity and decide perhaps that he doesn't want to kill anymore. So it's not a story you see as much. I mean, often you will sometimes if it's like the old cowboy story with the retired mercenary type, that protects a kid and has to come out of retirement and kicks a lot of ass. However, in this story, it's a full-fledged guy that's been doing this for years, seemed to have lost himself and kind of find it again. And it's funny, it's smart, it's got a lot of really great deep digs into DC's obscure heroes and history, and it's a lot of fun. I highly suggest it. And I'm also digging the Book of Boba Fett, the Star Wars show. And I don't want to get into a big thing about it just because people online are like, there's episode that's basically Mandalorian episodes, and sure, there are. But what they're building is an extensive universe. of side characters that are related to the main trilogies, the main Skywalker saga. So I like that there's overlap. It rewards you for paying attention and watching all the shows, and you get to really enjoy all this inner conflict between characters that have been established. And I mean, if you watch the Clone Wars show, there's a lot of that bleeding in as well. And I don't want to reveal anything there because it's a bit spoilery, but some characters from that show pop up, and it's pretty cool. Like it's quite cool to see them in live action, and I'm excited to see where the series is going to go. I'm super into it. I'm digging it. People that complain that it's not their Boba Fett, well, the only way I can describe it is I read a review where someone said the show's really good, but it'll never compete with the stories that fans have built up in their head for the past 30 years. And that's true. It's very true. Because, if you look at Boba Fett just as what he has done in the films, it's not very much. So, if you want to get a character and build him into what they're doing on the show, I mean, if you build it on what had been established in the films before, then, it works just fine for me. However, if you want to, take all that extra universe stuff, extended universe stuff that is no longer canon, well, you're going to be disappointed. But I don't care. You be disappointed if you want. It sucks. But I hope you can give it a shot and find some joy in it, because it's a really good show, and I really like what they're doing with it. So I am all in on Star Wars stuff. A friend of mine was kind of ragging on the show a little, and I said, I don't know, man. I'm maybe a Star Wars apologist. I really dig Star Wars and all aspects of it. If they made a Jar Jar Binks TV show, I'd give it a shot. I'd probably be happy about it. But I think it's just because Star Wars has been ingrained in my DNA since I was a kid, and it's still there. And, as long as... I can be critical. I can certainly point out things about the series that I don't particularly enjoy or don't like. But there's a lot of things I do like that a lot of people don't. So, I don't know if I'm the audience or not. And if you're, dismissive of the Star Wars franchise, well, that's your right as well. But just don't ruin it for everybody else. That's all I say. Don't yuck on people's yum, to use an old phrase. But I digress, and I've spent enough time. This was actually a fairly long conversation with Geof, and it was great. I really enjoyed it. He's a super fun guy. A lot of insight into the industry, a lot of insight into his process, his upbringing. Some really funny stories about the film industry and about knowing when certain films would tank based on what he saw about it. One in particular, which I don't want to ruin, but you'll find out as we go into the episode. There was a little hiccup while we were recording. There was a storm here the night before I recorded with Geof. The Friday night was an ice storm, and unfortunately we didn't lose power or anything, but when I was speaking with Geof, the internet, the power in the house flickered, which made my computer shut down. So there's a moment where he's talking where it just cuts out, and then I pick it back up. I put a little fun jazzy riff in there for you to know where that space is, just so it's not too jarring of a transition. But I didn't really want to get too deep into the editing. So there's stuff we talk about which gives some insight into Geof himself, his upbringing, and his family in between those bits. So I didn't really want to cut that out to make it seamless, because I think it's important to get a feel of who Geof is. And I feel like we do that in this talk. So, so... I will waste time no further and go into today's episode. This is episode number 76. Geof Isherwood.
There we go.
There he is. How are you?
Yeah, not bad, not bad.
Excellent.
I'm also just drawing.
Anyway. What are you working on?
Graphic novel called Toby's War. I'm penciling page 111 right now.
Oh my God, how many pages are there?
About 200.
Oh wow! So just that standalone graphic novel?
Yeah, it's inked through 95 or something, 97, something like that. Yeah.
Do you do the inking as well?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Are you doing?
Yeah.
You do it all digitally?
No, I'm penciling digitally, but I'm inking on paper.
Really? That's very interesting. I don't often see it that way. Usually it goes the other way. Like people will put in the darks and the colors all digitally.
Yeah, but why ink did a couple of reasons.
Oh, gorgeous.
You can spotlight my screen if you want.
Yeah.
These are all.
Oh, those are gorgeous.
All inked pages. So yeah, two things. One, inking a page means that's another, I don't know, 4 or 6 hours I'm not staring at a screen.
Yeah, that's fair.
And I've got art to sell after somebody wants to buy the pages later. There's
I,
real art. And
I,
the
I
third
was
thing
thinking
is
that too. Yeah.
I like drawing with these.
You know what? I tried, man. I tried to use those for so long, and I don't know. I just feel like I did a couple comics that way, and I just didn't. I couldn't master it. I'd always leave big blotches of ink somewhere, or I'd scratch it up too much, or like I
That's
just.
what this is for.
Yeah,
I
I
still use,
suppose
and this is still better than anything else. It still works the best.
the
So
white out pen. Yeah,
yeah,
that's funny. I tried it. I ended up going back to the micron pen just because I don't know, man. I so many times I just felt like I like the effect, and maybe I should go back and try it again sometime. But it's been a while. I just had so many times that I ended up getting ink all over everything that I got so frustrated I kind of gave it up.
yeah. Well, the other side is for sure. Microns are fine. Yeah, marker pens, those work fine too. I've used those also. Right now, I've decided I'm just going to use the nib and see where it takes me, and also keeps me from trying to be too super fine and careful. What I find interesting this time is I'm also reducing the pages. I scan them and I reduce them to be colored. So
Mm-hmm.
now I'm seeing what they really look like at print sizes with the size they're colored, right?
Yeah,
And now I'm starting to see, yeah, sometimes I do too much drawing and
yeah,
it kind of fills and it gets too busy. So it's kind of teaching me to back off a little and try and be a little simpler at times. And which I never really thought about because I'm always drawing big. So it's
yeah.
very easy to fill in a lot of little detail.
Yeah, I often wonder that, and I found that too. Just doing the little indie comics I did was, you spend all this work on this thing, and by the time you scan it down, and the time you scan it down and put the inks on it, and then get it in the right level, it's like you lose a lot of it, and you're like, why did I put so much work into this? I could have simplified this and moved on to something else.
Well, yeah, I don't worry about, but I never really worried about if I was penciling. I didn't worry about my inker, and I never worried about the colorist. And even if I looked at it later and went black, it's like, well, it's somebody else's job. I'm not going to pick on them.
Yeah,
I'll try to make my job as good as possible, so it can maybe inspire the rest a little bit, but also if it starts to lose some, at least it'll still have half of my original intention.
yeah. I mean, that is fair. I always kind of wonder that because just doing my own little thing. I didn't color everything myself, so the only person I had to disappoint was myself. But when it comes to commercial art, in a sense, like with comics especially, you spend so much time on one part of it, and I guess I don't often think about how, as an artist, you can go back and see what the final result looks like, whether it be what the inker does or what the colorist does, or some combination of the two. And you could be very unhappy with that, and that's got to be frustrating from an artist standpoint. So it's nice you can divorce yourself from that enough to
Well,
to look at it and live your life without getting too angry and stuff like that.
I think part of it is it's like being a goalie. A good goalie when the puck goes in the net behind you, they scored. You forget about it and you get on with the next game. You get
Yeah,
on with the next shot because if you think about it, you're in real trouble.
yeah,
All of a sudden you're going to let 5 more in before you know it. So you have to have a short memory that way. So once it's off my desk and gone, what's next?
yeah.
I've had to take that attitude, and also, well, as people would buy original art over the years, I would look at pages again, or I'd go sifting through a stack of pages to see what they wanted or something. That would be kind of interesting to an extent, but otherwise, they're in boxes. I don't just. It's not like I can remember. There was a writers' conference in Montreal, and Irving Layton was there, and he was watching a documentary about himself.
Yeah,
Like, talk about. No, maybe he was just wondering if they got it right,
yeah.
in his mind. But at the same time, I just want to see more about me.
Yeah, it's got to be
So
so weird to hit a level of success, because especially in comics, like, I mean, obviously there are certain people that have kind of hit a celebrity level beyond, just people that like comics, your Stan Lees and whatnot. But aside from that, like, it's got to be so surreal to be a comic creator and achieve some level of success. Someone makes an entire documentary about you, and ones that win award, like the Crumb one or the American Splendor one about
Oh yeah.
Picard. All those ones, like you sit there and you're like, wow, like it's got to be so surreal to, Picard was still a file clerk his entire life, and he's like going to watch, a big movie that's winning all these awards with Hollywood actors playing people he knows. Like it's got to be one of the most surreal things in your entire life to experience.
And especially when, now, of course, we don't always have perfect memories of what's
Mm,
taken place. I know, we do tend to remember things that happened once a
yeah.
lot better than stuff, you say, well, I go to this restaurant weekly, we've been for years. It's hard to remember one time you've been there because they all blend together, right?
Mm.
It's even like going to Comic Cons now. I've
Yeah.
been to so many. Which one was that again? Where did I see you?
Yeah, it's
It's
kind
this
of
funny
like
thing.
I don't know if you ever saw the movie Rashomon, but it's kind of like that experience of memory is sort of it's different. And I often find that too because you think back on things that happened to you, and maybe it's something that was exciting or something that you think other people would enjoy the story, and you think I've told that story so much that I remember it probably because I've just retold it so much. But in
That
the
helps.
retelling every time, is it still exactly what happened, or does it just get kind of homogenized over the years to fit the narrative of a good story? So.
Well, yeah, if you were having many conversations, but things like me meeting with Larry Hama when
Mm.
he was first giving me some pencil jobs, and first thing he looked at my art, you don't know how to draw. I'll never forget that. I just sat there and, okay, what's he going to say next? I'm in his office, right?
Yeah.
And he handed, but I remember specific things like, well, those big filing cabinets, big wide ones. I think they would kind of architects would use them for blueprints and stuff. Anyway, they would have their stuff in that, and he pulled out, well, I got these cull stores here. He says, I'm trying to put together a whole bunch of artists to do my Barbarian titles that we can work on regularly. And I want artists who I like their work, right? So here's an 8-page cull story. Pencil this and bring it back next week, which I did, and I went back and he goes, it's all wrong. But it was the storytelling, not so much the figure drawing. So he put tracing paper over it and he laid the whole thing out for me. And he says, but every time he did a panel, he explained why. He said what's going on here, the framing, focusing, the eye, all kinds of things like this, right? The mixed use of camera angles and all that. So that was terrific. So he explained all to me. He says, bring this back next week. And I did I followed his layouts, and he went, good. Here's another one.
Yeah.
He never said another word about it, but he did say, he goes, I like freelancers where I can look at 99% of the job is good right away.
Yeah.
I don't have to go nitpicking and try and fix stuff. I don't want to do that.
Yeah.
I just want stuff turned in that's good the first time.
Wow, that's like a whole art school class in a single session. That's amazing.
Yeah, and I
Especially-
learned more from him then I did in 5 years of art school. So, in essence. But then again, why was that? Because Marvel's in the business of publishing comics and stories and all this, so they needed artists who could do the job for them. It's not like they were, we always think, oh wow, I got hired, it's just great, like they're doing you a favor or something. They're not doing you a favor. You're doing them the favor by bringing your expertise to them so that they'll be able to sell the comics, right?
Yeah, quickly. Like there's things that people don't take into account as quickly, efficiently, and if it's not something they have to babysit, I mean, you could be the best artist in the world, but if your book's always late or, you're impossible to deal with editors, you're not worth the time. It doesn't matter to them.
Well, you must have talked to a bunch of professionals over the years, but as like when Shooter came in, 60% of their titles were late.
Yeah.
And he got on a real thing. It's like, we're losing so much. We're spending so much extra money. Late fees to printers. They have a set schedule, and something's late, they have to squeeze it in overtime and all. I mean, it's not just, and then stuff misses shipping, and there are so many layers to missing regular schedules that just cost a lot extra. He was trying to cut back on all that waste. And the other problem are just a lot of artists some can't hack the daily grind of sequential comics. It's really not for everybody.
You have to love it. I mean, and I've talked to a few artists, most recently just before you, and actually an old roommate of mine years ago who broke into comics, named David Cutler. He's drawn for Marvel right now. He's doing the redesigns on Thunderbird and the new issue, bringing him back, and some other stuff. And he talked about that you have to love it, like you really do. There's like a real grind to it where you just have to sit there and crank out the pages. And to him, drawing superhero comics was his dream. And like drawing other comics he enjoys, but like superheroes are what make him happy. And so he's like in heaven being able to do this all the time. And you have to really, really want it.
Yeah, well, that's the thing. I was pretty much the same as and as we found out with I read in that John Buscema book that Amanda got for me. It's a big, thick hardcover with a lot of his work.
I love his work.
He had to learn how to do superhero comics because he'd been doing those romances and westerns and stuff before that. Like he and Romita pretty well invented the romance genre properly, But so his first couple of stories, they look a little stilted, and then eventually, he had to work with Kirby layouts first, and then eventually he kind of got it, And ultimately, though, from what I understand, he didn't really like doing superheroes. He thought they were a bit ludicrous and silly. That's why he liked doing. It's why he liked doing Conan, and it's very much similar to me in that sense that I always see Conan in that world as kind of a real world populated with real people. The superhero world is something different entirely, and it's great fun. But and I can see why, like the movies and stuff, a lot of the costuming, the pure, like if it done as a comic, adapted to film, doesn't really work so well.
Yeah,
that's why they change a lot of it around, and it look more like cosplayers. Costumes have wrinkles and all this kind of thing because I can see Marvel's trying to appeal to more the general public because they won't understand the spandex world. So
I think
it's a whole different thing.
Yeah, I think they started that way, like because you look at like the event, like where they've gone up to now. They really did seem to start that route, like to make costumes that were kind of reminiscent of the original ones, but also had real world application. But lately, it seems like they have enough. They've built enough a goodwill with the regular non-comic book reading public that they seem to be leading more into stuff and designs that sort of mirror the comics more. Like, the new Sam Wilson Captain America costume is really, really like almost exactly the one in the comic. And like they gave Scarlet Witch a more prominent costume similar to her old one with the tiara and the thing. And they've kind of like, and it looks like the new the new Thor movie with the Taika Waititi's doing, but he always seemed to have a real passion for the old stuff. I was really reminiscent of that. But I know what you mean. Like you look at the Eternals movie and they all look really cool and celestial, but they don't really look quite as colorful and comic booky as they did in the initial book. So it's a weird marriage that it's a tightrope that they try to walk. And I think they've done an okay job with it, but I agree. Sometimes you just want to see like a goofy looking, or not goofy, but like, a real harkening back to those sort of old costumes because they're beautifully designed. Some of them.
Yeah. What I find is worth it with the DC movies, or has been, and again, I haven't seen everything, but just the color saturation has been toned down.
Oh yeah, yeah.
A lot of them just look bland, and it's like when I was a kid picking up comics, it's those primary colors, they jumped at me. So it wasn't just the idea of a superhero, it was the look, it was that whole feel which excited me, which I got it, I want to read this, right? So it was that whole world that drew me in, and it's funny how as somebody I spend 95% of my time doing drawings in pencil or ink, not dealing with color, that it's the color that really matters so much too, and you really pick that up with film. But I also having worked in film for over 20 years now, I understand with presenting color on screen can be a problem because it's if you have certain primaries that are too strong, reds or whites or something, they can bleed out. It's
Mm.
very hard for them to get a good balance for the video screen. So I think that's kind of a deliberate. It's a deliberate choice not to overcook it.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I want to get to that. I kind of want to go back and start at the start of your career, but I definitely want to talk about film. I do a bit of acting as well, and sometimes when you're called to sets, they have certain colors that you just can't wear. They say like bring a certain outfit, but don't wear this.
Yes.
And you kind of don't realize why until you look around at the color palette in the scene you're in. You realize it just wouldn't fit. Like it would be really strange for that effect. But yeah, the Superman thing with Batman, the DC comics, and I have a lot of issues with some of their movies, but they actually like colored down. They digitally decolorize those movies, and then you can see footage of what the costume, like the Superman costume, looks like before they do that, and it looks really bright and like much closer to what I would want to see a Superman movie being. But it feels like thematically with DC, I mean, they've done some cool stuff lately. Like I love the new Suicide Squad movie that James Gunn did, and some of those bright, colorful things that doesn't skip on color and it's bright and beautiful and has a lot of stuff. But it just seems like Batman is a popular character and it's a dark story, so they just paint everything with that brush, and it doesn't need to be like I don't want Batman as Superman, and it feels like they make the movies feel that way in story and tone and everything else. But
Yeah.
but for you, where did you begin? Where were you born?
I was born in Quantico, Virginia. My father
Really?
was had done ROTC, Reserve Officer Training for the Marines, so he'd finished his college, his university in Boston, and then was in Quantico, which is where the FBI also
I was going to
has their
say it's.
headquarters.
I think movies has made me think that if you're in Quantico, you have something to do with the FBI.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
it's also the headquarters for the Marines, and so he was doing that for a couple of years. So I was born there.
Mm-hmm.
And my mother's family is on the eastern shore of Maryland, so we were fairly close. So I grew up there for a few years, was there. And then my father, I mean, we followed his career primarily. So
Mm-hmm.
um, he was a high school teacher, leaving the military. He didn't continue. He did his time, but then he went into education. So he's a teacher, he's a principal, and then he got into as a professor of educational administration.
Oh wow.
And once he gotten his master's at University of Delaware and then doctorate at Rutgers in New Jersey, then he had some job offers, and we had decided McGill in Montreal was the place.
Oh, I was
So
wondering that because I noticed that
Yeah.
it says you're an American. Like if you look at your Wikipedia, it says you're an American, but it looks like a lot of your career and time is spent in Canada and in Montreal. So I was curious
Yeah.
how that came to be. So that's very interesting.
Yeah, so the whole family moved up here when I was 10 years old.
Mm-hmm. So you don't have a lot of memory of traveling around the states and living in military lifestyle.
Not at all, no,
No.
because by the time I could remember anything, we were living in the Eastern Shore. It's kind of somewhat largest property. My grandparents had their house, and then they had a secondary building, which was originally a chicken coop, which was then they converted. It's a 100-foot long building, right?
Oh wow, it's the hell of a chicken coop.
Well, that's it. Then it was converted into a boarding house, and then it was extended. My parents did all the work themselves, and my grandparents, I should say. And then they had 3 children, one of which is my mother, of course. So this big long building was divided in 3, and my uncle with his 6 girls, he had 6 girls.
Wow.
The oldest is my age.
Wow.
And everybody says, "Oh, you poor guy." And he goes, "Yeah, but he was weighted on hand and foot."
Yeah.
So I grew up with a whole bunch of girls right away. So I got used to, the female world in a hurry. Anyways, yeah, so he stayed there, right? So then my mother, of course, with my father, we moved, and her other sister wound up. They were in Delaware for a while and moved down to Tennessee. So
Oh wow.
so we spread out a bit, but we traveled pretty much between Maryland to Montreal and back, and I've also and my father's relatives are on he grew up in the New York City area out on Long Island, so
Hmm.
we we would stop there too. That's pretty much was the extent of our travels. We didn't really, that was sort of it. It's not till much more recently, say in the last 10 years or so, when I started going to a lot of comic conventions, that I started traveling
Mm.
much more extensively.
Oh, excellent. So was comics something you were always like? When did that become part of your life? You mentioned as a kid, you kind of discovering them with the bright colors and stuff. But was that just something that usually it seems like I talk to these people that work in comics?
Hmm.
It was always something that was introduced by like a brother, or are you an only child or?
No, but I sort of, because in a way, because my sister's 7 years younger and my brother's 13,
Oh
so I
well,
was kind of an only child for
yeah.
quite a while.
Oh, I see. So you didn't have
And
the older brother that introduced you to it. That seems to be a popular trend, or a cool uncle or something.
it's funny because I can't really say what it was. I mean, at some point I was, like 8 years old, 7 or 8, but I was, no, it had to be even younger than that, like something like 5 or 6. We had some of my cousins, they would have Richie Rich and Casper and things like this. So I was aware of comics, and I had shows on TV. I liked watching like Astroman and Speed Racer and things
Mhm.
like this. I really liked cars when I was younger.
Oh yeah.
That was my first thing. I would draw a line on paper and I just draw cars. Did another line, cars lined up. That was my first thing. Then later on, I started getting an interest. Yes, once I started reading, found superheroes, I got an interested in figure drawing
Mhm.
also. So I was starting to. So I thought, well, I've got to learn anatomy and how to do that right without any specific direction. It's just like I want to know how the stuff's put together. So it was around the age of 10. It was when I officially said I want to draw comics for a living, and I started making my own little stories. And also, yeah, what was it? Yeah, it was that. Oh yeah, I remember seeing also a picture of Charles Schultz's studio at his home in Minneapolis,
Oh wow.
Minnesota. Right? It was a picture of this, that's his room and his drawing table, and I said, I want to work from home. When I grow
Yeah,
up, I don't want to commute.
it's great you could figure that out now as a 10-year-old. That's what you want. Is so
It's
many so
funny.
many adults have to go through a long time before they try to figure out a way to make that happen.
Yeah, because I always, again, I always found I worked better alone. It wasn't until later when I started getting into the film world that I much was much more outgoing and sure and really enjoyed working with a whole bunch of people that way. But in comics, it's like it's just me and the drawing board, the paper. I've got a story sent in, great. But anyway, but it didn't just happen
Hmm.
instantly. It took me from then. It took me a long time to really get myself prepared or good enough to even work professionally. My first trip to Marvel was when I was 16. We were on the way home from a summer vacation and drove into New York City because we usually go around it.
Hmm.
Stopped, and then my parents were circling the block while I went up to Marvel with my then drawings, which were like okay for 16-year-old, but
But what year
certainly
would
not.
this have been?
1977,
Okay.
and so I met Dave Cockrum and Marie Severin.
Wow.
And both were really nice. They looked at my work and gave me encouragement. And they said, there's some good stuff you could hear, but look at this artist, look at that artist, read this, read that, this kind of thing. And they gave me some good advice. And after about 20 minutes, I went down and we continued on our way.
So I'm guessing your folks are supportive of your career ambitions, being that they were willing to take you into New York City and drop you off at Marvel Comics.
Yeah, pretty much. And then it was following that I'd finished high school. Of course, in Quebec, it was a grade 11, and then I had a year of CEGEP, and I was still doing.
Yes, very very sorry about that.
Oh well, heck, you can't help it. Like I said, I've had times I even had to cancel a class after a while when the whole we went poof here.
Well, it's strange because like I live in I know your wife's from Nova Scotia, so you must have some kind of a
Yeah,
knowledge of
you're in
it.
Truro.
Yes, I am. Yeah.
Yeah,
Just
we usually stop there one way or the other.
oh yeah. Did you
You know
go
that
to a particular restaurant or just
well that strip off the highway. There's a whole bunch of the gas stations and restaurants and stuff.
yeah? If you go when you see that strip when you come off the highway, if you go into where all those are, if you go the other way, like out towards the country, I live out that way.
Oh, okay.
So it's a place called Old Barns. But yeah, it's a nice little area. But yeah, there's a big ice storm here yesterday, and it's all done. It's just a normal day today. But sometimes you get residuals. Like I'm not sure if someone might have hit a pole somewhere or something, but that happens, I guess.
Yeah, but it's that ice that great. It's so heavy,
Yeah.
and that messes things up a lot. Yeah, we were supposed to. I don't know if that you got the part of that big storm that had blown up through the Midwest.
Yep. Oh yeah, we get
Yeah,
pretty much them all.
we got. We're so far north now. I mean, not that far, but we're far enough north that we got like 2 inches of it, and they were talking they got 2 feet and everything. We just were on the northern edge of that bit of that granular stuff,
Yep.
and it was no big deal. It was a bit slippery on the roads, but no
Yeah,
big deal.
that's kind of what yesterday's storm was. It was like a lot of ice, but it's just everything's really hard now. Like I can't even shovel because the ice is it's just solid ice. Like the snow is solid ice. I actually have a wood stove, so I brought some wood in this morning, and the wheelbarrow wouldn't even sink through the ice. I literally would fill up with wood and it would push. That's how solid the ice is. Just along and to get into the house. So.
Yeah, that's really nasty, and that's the thing. You hate to let it thaw and then freeze, and then you can't do anything about it.
Yeah, well, it's Nova Scotia's crazy because like we'll get this, and then I think on Monday or Tuesday it's going to be +6 and like raining all day, so it's all going to melt. It's just
we're eventually looking to move back.
oh really nice.
Amanda's from there, of course, so she's probing around, she's sticking her nose around Dartmouth, Halifax area, and just to see what might be possible in her area,
Sure.
in her field there. So
yeah, totally. Well, it'd be great
it's a
to have
maybe.
more. Yeah, it'd be great to have more cool comp people around. Several people that are involved in the industry. Have moved to Nova Scotia since. I think some people have kind of done it because of COVID, and some just realize that this come out for cons and realize it's a nice area and that the price cost of living is so much less than some of the bigger cities, and also you can for comic people you can kind of do what you do anywhere. So a lot of them have kind of made the jump. Anyway,
Of course, if we had money, we'd just move to Hawaii. But
yeah, I hear you. I was going to say, or you could just move to the tropics and live your life on a beach. Do a Hemingway. I always say that seems to be the dream, minus the suicide. But just the sitting on a beach drinking all day, point. Cats. Yeah, So
yeah, that's the thing. Yeah, that's a big problem. Is to people's. It's amazing talking with various artists. How when you see work that looks so sure and confident, and yet you talk to them and how insecure they are about their work. It doesn't match.
Yeah.
And of course, you got other people who are horrible, who are, completely, I could do anything, but it doesn't, the two don't go together.
No, it's often too, because you meet people like in the comic circuit or even at conventions and stuff that you're like I love your art and they're real jerks. And sometimes it lines up. You're like, okay, well, maybe it's, they're, but then often you'll meet people that you're like, well, and they're just, I think it's a confidence thing, maybe like they're just so confident. It's pushed in arrogance. And then now it's just the way things are. But, yeah, like my friend Dave, I mentioned, I talked to last time, he does amazingly beautiful work, and he just talking to him, you can tell he's just super, but I think the industry kind of does that. I mean, if you're on any kind of social media, there's obviously a bunch of people that might not care for your artwork, and it's very vocal. And he even mentioned you're talking about meeting Larry for the first time, going to a portfolio review like maybe a year or two before he got hooked up with Marvel, and the DC guy was like, yeah. He's like, yeah, it's good. It's all good. I don't know what to tell you. He's like, but it's just, there's something, I don't know. It's just something that doesn't work about it. And that was it. He's like, I don't even know if I can tell you what it is, but it just doesn't. And that's it. And it's like crushing to him. And, the guy,
that Dave said,
my friend Dave. Yeah.
Yeah. That's what they said to him.
Yeah.
That's a fascinating story because Larry was talking about the very same thing. Oh, by the way, are you how are you operating? Do you record all of this and then
Yeah,
put it together?
yes, I'll put it together later. I got what we did before, and I got this now, so
Yeah.
I'll mix
So
it together.
what Larry had told me was exactly that same thing. Now, again, this was because he started in the early to mid 70s,
Mm-hmm.
and he said most editors were writers.
Mm-hmm.
And so he would take his work to them and he'd go, well, it looks good. There's something about it that bothers me. And so, you don't get the job kind of thing. And he'd go, I don't know what it is. They wouldn't tell me exactly what. And he said that was the problem. So later he went to continuity, and he said he sat next to Neil Adams for 3 years and watched Neil, plow through hundreds of portfolios, and people would leave in tears and throw their work in the garbage and never come back. And so Larry, if have met him or whatever,
I met him briefly, just at a con, just at his table. That was it.
He's a good-natured, fun guy. And
I'd love to talk to him. I think I love his work. So
yeah, and he's going, well, it was sort of the job. I had to play this hard ass,
yeah.
Sitting next to Neil. But what he said I made it my business to go talk to other artists and find out very specifically what I needed to do. And so when he gave me the storytelling lesson that day, that's what he was doing.
Mm.
He says, you've got to put this guy here, and this other guy's framing, and the spear's pointing in the direction you want, and this other's in the background, and you're setting up the scene. And like every he was talking how the compositions worked, all that very, very specifically, because he knew. People say there's something about your work I don't like, and he says, well, if they couldn't tell me what it was, it didn't do me any good, right?
Yeah.
And so I've taken his word to heart, and then since I've been teaching, because I've been teaching what I know at Algonquin College in the illustration and concept art program now. It's my 7th year there. I treat it exactly the same way, and I find what's been good is I've gotten sharper at trying to distill down the drawing process into simpler ideas. It's like the drawing process itself isn't necessarily easy. When you get, to really more sophisticated and realistic type drawing, the more you delve into the human figure, you realize that it gets like more difficult, not easier in a way. But at the same time, you have to land on a system to be able to do lots of figure drawing in a short amount of time. You have to come up with a system to do it. So all of that I'm as specific as I can get. You're drawing this for this reason, and that's the whole. I won't go into a lesson now, but it's
well, they save people for their scholar tuition. Come on, yeah, they'll give it up for free.
Well, but that's the whole thing.
Yeah, that's beautiful.
And I've had students after say to me, says, I love your class because you're so specific. Nothing. I never say, well, draw this. If it feels right.
Yeah.
What is that's meaningless? It's okay. That in itself to an artist can have meaning, but it means something different to everybody. But if I'm saying you're drawing this figure and you have this hand here and not here because now you can't see it, you have to put things in view so the reader can understand what's going on. They can understand the actions, they can understand the expressions and gesture and all that. They have to understand what's going on fast.
Yeah.
And then that's the thing with comics. We can spend hours and hours on pages, but somebody reading it, like, have you kind of analyzed how someone reads a comic?
Oh yeah.
You read the word balloons and you glance at the pictures. Now we as artists will stop and pore over these pictures, and we'll be analyzing them specifically to see how did they solve drawing questions and problems of how to draw characters at certain angles and all this kind of thing. That's what I kind of self-taught myself that, trying to figure and copying all these artists, Buscema and Kane and whatever, to figure out what was their drawing solution to doing all kinds of angles of anything, right? and being fascinated by the variety of art that I was seeing. And so that's what I'm really trying to get at now with everybody. And it also has sharpened up my own drawing, because now I've having to deal specifically with teaching anatomy, and I call it figure drawing for illustration purposes.
Hmm.
So it's all about the storytelling.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's
So the
what
movement.
first,
Yeah.
and as Wally Wood even said. Now, sadly, I never got to meet Wally, but
Oh, that would have been
he was
awesome.
saying, that the art is a slave to the story.
Mm.
So don't get carried away by detail and trying to impress people with the drawing style. Make sure you're getting the idea across. And of course, when we're young, we are super influenced and super impressed by drawing style and all this. So it's like listening to music, and a song that's kind of like okay, but this guitar solo is unbelievable, right? But does
Yeah.
that have anything to do with the song?
No, that's right. It doesn't hurt it more than it helps the overall thing, and I can totally see your point in that.
It's like
Um,
early Rush albums or something.
it's like this one guy really has something to prove. It's like yeah, they're gonna hear my licks.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
that's it exactly. And
And you can tell it. You can tell it in story when the artists they're really trying. It's more of a portfolio piece for them than it is actually trying to service the story. Um,
well,
and
of course,
and
in the Image, it kind of took off that way when
yeah, it really did.
those guys, they freely the story was just an excuse to just draw all their crazy, wild, super muscular, super hot pinup chicks on the pages, and they didn't care about the rest. I mean,
Yeah,
they said it, and it's all style, and it's all flash, and it's all 22 pages of pinups,
yeah,
and the story was just, it was an
yeah,
excuse just to get stuff on the page.
yeah. That's for sure. It's every once in a while I'll encounter something like that. Like many years ago, I used to help out at a comic store, and you put people's comics away in their bin so that when they come in and their pull list. And I'm a graphic designer. That's what I normally do. So like it was just something my comic guy would be out of town. He asked me if I would fill in for him. So I'd be there. And there are a few books that people get. There are a lot of those Image books. So there's this one called, and I used to always make it up as a reference because it was so bad. Tarot, the Black Rose, I think it was called. It's one of those like super low whatever budgets, but every issue is her top gets ripped off at some point in the fight, and then the bad guy ends up spanking her or something. And I'm looking through this book, and I'm like why are you buying an entire comic just for this? Like it's every issue is the same story. It's just an excuse to have her topless and getting spanked by a guy. Like this is the story. This is what's bringing. It's like what? Like surely there's other avenues you can go for this. Like why buy a comic that like it just feels like such a like using the medium for something that's like seems wildly outside of what it should be used for. Like I guess
it's a narrow fetish
yeah.
spanking niche
Yeah.
or something.
I know, but like, how is there enough people out there to warrant making this? Like, is there enough demand? I mean, there must be, I guess, because there were a lot of issues and it was still coming out, and this one guy really got a lot of them. So,
well, there we go.
Yeah, but it just to me, it just felt like it was just the whole story is just an excuse to have that. None of it mattered. It didn't make any lick of sense, and it didn't matter. That's not what the people are coming for. And I guess early Image did kind of cater to that.
Yeah, and that's the thing is so many people deride comic art from the 90s, and because with Image and stuff, and especially females with breasts drawn with circle templates and stuff.
It's like Vampirella and the Lady Death comics and all those. Like you could almost every time they came out, it was just excuses for that every time.
Yeah, and the funny thing is, I can remember doing a couple of things that were kind of censored in my regular Marvel titles.
Oh, really?
And I was aware of that stuff, and I was trying to maybe bring a little, maybe like a new modernized sensibility to comics, to my comics. But I can remember one time in a Conan series, I had his female sidekick there was wearing essentially a vest, I guess, and she had like a little crisscross string holding it together. So what did they do? They drew her like with a white ripped crop top underneath it. All the pages had any panel she was in had this little piece of glued on stat paper with this line. When I got the pages back, I took them all off. I wouldn't do this. And I'm going, with what you've been publishing in X-Men is so far beyond anything like this in a titillation sense that why are you picking on my story?
Oh, that's
my
funny.
Characters,
especially in Conan when it's all like, you know, babes and broadswords and dragons, and like it was like Franz Frazetta's like art like was such an inspiration. And it's just all that everywhere. Like that doesn't seem to be the place to do that. Yeah. But I mean, like when I remember when Fantastic Four, they took the 4 on Sue Storm's shirt and then reversed it out so you could see like her cleavage through it. And I was like, what's happening in comics? You know, yeah. Like it just seemed. I mean, at that point, I was a teenager, and I mean, I never really found comics overly titillating in that way, despite how they were drawn. But it just seemed like a real industry shift at that point, I guess. And I can see what you're saying for sure.
Yeah, well, there was that one. But other couple of things I remember in Conan the King, I had a sword ran a guy through, and then when it was printed, I saw the sword that was sticking out his chest was missing.
Oh, really?
Like he's stuck in his back, and it doesn't. We can't show a guy getting run through. And then,
well, where's the sword go? Yeah.
Well, I guess it broke off or something.
I guess.
So, and then the other one was in Namor, and that's the thing too. I was always willing to revise something if necessary, but obviously with scheduling, things would happen too late. Or my editor, I think it was Mike Rockwitz at the time, he might have okayed something, which he usually would have because he okayed, the pencil stage to the ink. But then somebody else, put the kibosh on it. So there was another one where issue 50 of Namor, I did a 2-page spread, pages 2 and 3, where Namor looks back and there's Sue Richards on the bed, stretching and getting. So obviously they spent the night together. Mm-hmm. That was cut from the story entirely.
The whole 2-page spread?
Yeah, it's gone. I still have the art.
How would they fill it in for the page count, though? You have to make extra pages, or?
They had 2 of my pinups that I did. They just stuck them at the end.
Interesting.
And I said, why didn't you tell me? I would have happily drawn 2 more. Now the readers have got cheated out of 2 pages of story.
Yeah.
Well, we couldn't do this, whatever. But again, in retrospect, I'm realizing it was probably a last-minute thing, and they didn't have time to have pages repenciled, re-inked, recolored, the works. They just didn't have time. So that was an easy solution. Wow. But also, later on, it was really Lyra, the Lemurian nemesis, who creates her son Lyron, who has Namor as a father, right? Like a sperm donor type of idea. But when he's born, he's in this, I drew him in this glass tube, and you see this fetus thing and like umbilical cord stuff and bubbles. They cut those off.
Really? That was too much?
Yeah. And I'm
wow.
Going, what happened? How's he supposed to be connected to the thing? Well, we can't draw that. We can't show that stuff. Like, why?
It's so yeah. I mean, it's weird because like film censorship's the same way. If you listen to anybody that's in the world, now you are as well, which we'll get to. But you're like, it's so. You can show someone's guts coming out of their mouth, but you can't show like a topless woman, or you can show that, you know what I mean? Like you can show someone getting disemboweled live, like on film, but goddamn, if you see, anything that's like, it's just so crazy. I can't understand it.
Butt crack,
Yeah, butt crack. Yeah.
But the funny thing is, that's the thing that gets me. This is going on, and then what's on television now? Is incredible. We watch things like NCIS and stuff. Somebody at the beginning of the show gets caught in a jet fighter pilot fire, and they just show this, crispy critter, burnt body.
Yeah.
For a couple of seconds, I'm going, wow, that's really cool. And then I'm thinking, they get away with putting this on television.
Oh yeah. I've been enjoying.
Netflix shows or anything like that where they, censorship doesn't matter anymore and language is, you can say
Yeah.
anything. But
I think they're just trying to catch up with that, though. They're trying to compete, right? So with
yeah,
streaming, and streaming is do whatever it wants because you have to click to watch it, so you know what you're getting into. On TV, it's airing, so you gotta. But yeah, I know it's so indiscriminate and weird. What I've enjoyed about network television is the what you can say on TV now. Like there's like a dissenting, like we haven't got to the F word yet, but like shit's okay, ass is okay. All those ones are all that work their way up. And it's funny because like the second, I think it was when Trump was called other countries shithole countries, and it came out on the news. The news
yeah.
would start saying shit, and just to quote what he was saying, and then the TV show started saying it, so now it's okay. Like it's weird how trends go like that.
Well,
Very strange.
that's as an aside. That's what I felt was one part, because of course I had plenty of time to ponder and analyze the situation. But part of his popularity was that he's supposed to have the top position in the country,
Yeah,
and yet he's so crass. Uh, he's such a bore. He's so bigoted and misogynist and all of this. But since can become president, he just legitimized all that behavior for
yeah.
everybody else who's tried to, better not say this, or oh well, he said and did it. Now the lid is off and we can say and do anything we want. He legitimized half the country
Yeah,
to
I said the same
act
thing.
like
Yeah.
asses.
Yeah, I said the same thing. You can. It used to be and I think the internet started it, but it used to be that if you were, the town racist or the town whatever, people just didn't want anything to do with you, and you lived a lonely life, having to deal with the consequence of being a jerk. But now, like with the internet, you can go find a community of people that wholeheartedly believe whatever backwards, twisted thing you're into, and support you for it. So now you feel like you have a community. And then when you have the guy that's the leader of the free world on TV saying your backwards, stupid opinions, and you're like, well, this guy's the president, so obviously it's like maybe I am right. Society's wrong, and then you're storming the Capitol, and everything else happens. So
Yeah, well, I think part of the thing with him was it's not necessarily that he is that.
oh
Part
yeah,
of it is, but he read the crowd and
yep.
he played up to them
I,
like
I,
better
I
than anybody else could.
That's what I said to someone the other day. I said, I'm not sure what's worse, either being a horrible racist or pandering to horrible racists. I'm not sure which one is worse. I mean,
Yeah,
probably
and then
pandering because you know better, but you still choose not to because it'll advance you in some way.
and the whole rest of the party went down that
Oh, yeah.
sinkhole.
Yeah.
The other side of it struck me recently was gaining support by telling your followers that they've been victimized.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
This is major because it's that make America great again. In other words, you've been victimized. And it's okay. There are certainly social classes and minority groups and whatever who have been. These are not the people he was
No, no,
after.
no, no, no.
He was getting everybody who have not been
Yeah.
victimized.
Yeah. Yeah.
Very well-to-do people that have got whatever they want in life, even if they're not rich, they still have their pickup trucks and their guns and their beer, and they have their football and NASCAR and and whatever, just run a list off. They've got all that stuff, and then they've been told they've been victimized.
Yeah.
This was another thing back during Quebec separation when I think it was Lucien Bouchard said he said we are humiliated. I'm saying, and everybody says, "Oh yeah, we are."
Yeah.
Like they hadn't even thought of it,
Yeah.
you know. And so then he could, he almost got away with getting the vote. So
Yeah.
it's amazing how it's and now in our world, of course, we find in the education system, and I can't I it's an odd thing getting into the world that I'm in with comics, or we are with comics, with illustration for film and all that. That I think it's terrific that people with special needs and whatever are now given the opportunity to get education when they were just dropped before. There is that. But what happens also is what I have to keep warning them, my classes about, is once you get into the work world, they don't care.
Yeah.
If you can't come and say, well, I have ADHD, and so I can only turn in about half as much work. Oh, thank you. Next.
Yeah.
They're
Yeah.
interested in getting the work they need done on time, period, or it costs more. So
Yep.
they don't care about all this stuff.
Yeah. You're right. Society doesn't move that way.
And
It's
and
like we'll
so,
we'll we'll do a let's talk day on Bell or something to raise some money, but we're not actually going to try to change society to suit the needs of those who actually needed the change. It's
no, but it
we'll yeah,
pumps Bell's
that's
corporate
right. It makes us
profile.
look good, so we'll prop that. But we actually like if you're like, well, we can hire someone with special needs in this position, but it might cost the company a little more. Nope, like that won't happen. God, no, that
I've
won't
seen
happen.
Amazon commercials where they have, someone says, well, I have this and that problem, and Amazon hired me. Well, I think, okay, well, you can complain about them, but they've done it, they
Mm-hmm.
do stuff like that. Fine. And there is a place for everyone. But, the students coming into my program, or my won't ours, should say our program, but my classes, I have to tell them, if you're going to be really if you're able to build a career doing this type of work, it's an elite position.
Mm-hmm.
It requires an awful lot of practice. It requires, and I don't know where talent comes from. I don't know, but it's whatever that natural gift somebody may have that pushes them in this direction. It still needs a lot of developing. This is what gets me about sometimes, certain comic book artists at convention panels will say, well, how did you get your job drawing this, this Batman series? Well, I was talking to the writer, and he said maybe you should work with me, and I called up the editor, and I got the job. Like, as if it happens out of thin air like that.
Yeah.
There's never any talk about I spent so much time doing all this practice, all this work,
Yeah.
you know, all these submissions, trying to get something going, working on small titles, independent, and eventually just got my foot in the door and things could finally start moving,
Well, let's go back to that. So, how did you get your foot in the door then? So, when you mentioned you were interested in comics and you got out of school and you went to an art school,
Yeah.
and then so where was the first? And you met with Hama, but where was your first? Like, was he your first into getting to do work?
No, in fact, by the time I saw him and he told me I didn't know how to draw, I was already been there for at least a year.
Uh-huh.
The funny thing is, and of course everybody talks networking now.
Yep.
Networking. You've got
Yeah.
to know people, and I got into comics knowing, how many people I knew in comics? Zilch. In Marvel or DC, I knew nobody. I was just drawing sample pages, and my first comic was a Bizarre Adventures. It was a 9-page horror story, which I penciled, and Aiken and Garvey did kind of inks and really fun tone work on it. It was a black and white book. That led me to nothing else. Then DC had a book called New Talent Showcase, so I sent some stuff in there, and they gave me a Western horror story, which I penciled, and they sat on it for a couple of months, and then they didn't get anybody to ink it, so I asked, could I ink it? They sent it back to me. Yeah, so I inked it. That led to nothing else. That was in the fall, like summer, fall of '82.
Mm.
I graduated from university that spring. So did a couple of stories, nothing further. So then the spring of '83, I said, well, I got to go to New York. I can't operate out of Montreal and get work. It's not happening. So I was working at a store called Miracle Mart. It was part of the Steinberg's empire back in Quebec and Montreal. So it was a what do you call it? A department store
Oh yeah.
chain like a Rossi or a Zellers or something,
Yeah.
or Walmart, this kind of thing. So I was doing floor plans, and I was working at their head office doing floor plans and planograms and setting up products and all this kind of business.
Oh, fun.
And so, that one I had gotten from somebody knew I was drawing and recommended me for that. So that one I knew somebody who recommended me for the job. But so I was doing that. So I left that for a while, went to New York, and was able to stay on Long Island with an aunt of mine, and so I could stay at her house without having to spend all this money. So I just was train rides in and out of the city on the Long Island Railroad every so often, but I was there geez, must have been like 2 or 3 months. And I had first when I got there, I went into Marvel and to DC, and I had the work I had done. Nothing's going on, right? And then I went up to Red Circle that where Rich Buckler was editing some comics. And
that's the Archie offshoot, right? Is that am I right about that?
yeah,
Yeah,
Archie,
with the shield
Archie
and the
offshoot.
web and all those guys.
Yeah, so
Yep.
he was up doing this, penciling this thing, the Mighty Crusaders
Yeah.
at the time. And so he said, "Hey, he looked at my work. Yeah, this is great. Here's some pages. I'm kind of halfway penciled. I've got some roughs. Finish the penciling. Sit down there and just." So I worked for him for 3 days. Then I got a call from Ralph Macchio. "Hey, Geof, we need a fill-in for Daredevil. Can you come in and get in?" I said, "Yeah." Zing!
Based on what, the
Thanks,
Red
Rich.
Circle stuff,
I
or
gotta
just the
go.
samples you sent in?
Ralph didn't know what I was doing on Red
Oh, yeah.
Circle. I was doing it for Rich, and I just give him the pages back, and so that was just there. It was just between us. All based on my other samples, and
Cool.
and so
Awesome.
I said, okay, well, the first stories were great, but this is now this is the real thing, because
Yeah.
I'm in the office looking at Frank Miller and Klaus Janson bringing me real pages, the real art, stuff like this. Oh wow, this is great. So finally,
So you're the
so I
fill-in
got
for
it.
Daredevil when Miller was working on it?
Yeah, I think David Mazzucchelli might have taken over by then, but
Right.
it was issued. Yeah. So anyway, I
Cool.
had
Wow.
I did that one, and then I did that. He liked it fine. I handed it in quickly enough. Gave me a Power Man and Iron Fist. These were fill-in issues, and this was a time, of course, '83 and stuff. Marvel was starting to publish more and more material, and they were just needing artists, but also needing artists who could get stuff done on time. And mine was good enough, and quality-wise, plus deadlines I was good at meeting, meant that I was a bit more of a, there was a better commodity for them.
Yeah,
to
reliable.
hire. So,
Reliable is a huge thing, man, and not enough
reliable.
people understand how important that is.
Yeah. So so once I did some of those, and then eventually I started getting some regular stuff, and I worked on the epic title Swords of the Swashbucklers.
Oh yeah, I remember that book.
Jackson Guice.
Yeah.
And eventually, well, I really wanted to work on Barbarian or Conan stuff, so I did get over to the office and inked some Savage Sword stories and pin-ups and stuff like that for them. And eventually, after the cull work, then I did a few of those. And then I was offered Conan the King, as Mark Silvestri was very behind on the work there. And again, I can't say that he was slow deliberately, but I imagine he was also doing a number of jobs at once and just had a hard time keeping up. I think that's what happened with artists. We would say, or they seem to be too slow. It's just, if you get offered work, you don't say no.
Yeah.
You may never
and
get asked
especially
again.
if you have 3 or 4 things to do at once, you're trying, you want to do it all and get it all in, and 100%.
Yeah. So I think I've sort of in time come to realize that it's not that. So some artists may be lazy. Some artists may have a hard time just getting to the drawing table and sitting down to do the work.
Mhm.
There's that. That can be a problem, of course. But there are those who just have too big a pile on their desk, and they think, oh, I can handle this, and this, and then you hit a couple of speed bumps, with reference or things like that, or something with the story goes wrong, and it can just slow the whole chain down. So that's why it's also why once I started getting regular work, I came back to Montreal, because I knew if I stuck around in New York, I would get swamped. Absolutely, because if I was there regular, you'd be walking by the office. Hey, you, here I got pages that are late. Can you ink these 6 pages and bring them back tomorrow? It's like, it was insane that way.
Yeah.
That's why a guy like Vince Colletta got so much work, because he could ink a comic in a weekend.
Yeah.
And so people are complaining, well, Vinny only inks about half the pencils, but he got the job done.
Yeah.
And the book went out on time, and most readers didn't know the difference anyway.
Yeah. Wow.
And he inked couple of my Dazzler stories,
Yeah.
and everyone was, "Oh my God, you got Vinny to ink." And I look at what he's doing. I said, "Yeah," but somebody said he inks the women's faces nicely because it had to have pretty girls and all this.
Yeah.
And I wasn't that great at it at the time. I
Hmm.
still was learning how to glamorize the female in general. So it's still, I'm still fighting a bit with that. So, there's always a reason for these decisions across the board. And so it's, yeah, sure, you're not getting, Bernie Wrightson or to
Mm.
draw every title, or you're not getting, whoever, but it doesn't, you're getting people who get the work done.
Yeah, well, that is a huge, super important thing. Yeah, like you've done quite a few books for Marvel. Just looking at your catalog here, which is pretty robust. Silver Surfer work I actually really liked. I was looking back at some of that as well. I'm sure I have.
I got to ink John Buscema, which was tremendously fun.
Yeah, I have his. What? So were you inking those titles then? What around what time period were you doing that? Was that when he was doing the Silver Surfer comic from the start, or was that later on down the line?
These are late, very late in my
Okay.
time at Marvel, so late '90s, and
Okay.
so he had come back to pencil a few issues, and I still think I have like 6 of those pages, which I don't want to sell. I put out, people want to, how much do you want for this? Well, I hear the going rate's like $1,500 a page. No thanks. I said, good, I'll keep it, because the funny thing about that, I'll say about John, was when I was 18, he was up in Montreal at a convention, and I can't remember a damn thing about anything else except going to his table, and I stood off to the side and watched him draw for about 2 hours.
Wow.
And I asked him a couple of questions, like, what's your best advice to get into drawing comics? And his answer was, pick your favorite artist and swipe his style. And I realized the older I got, the more I realized he was right.
Yeah, it's great advice. I mean, you look at a lot of people that their art styles, and you can see, like, a friend of mine is Nick Bradshaw. He draws for Marvel.
Oh yeah, well, Nick and I, we know each other. In fact, a few years ago, we went over to France for a couple of shows, and we traveled together and everything. We wound up on the same plane flying over there and back.
Have you ever done the East Coast Comic Expo that he does out here?
No, I haven't had a chance to.
Oh, cool, yeah.
It never really coincided time-wise with what was going on. So, but we would like to.
Yeah, I'm always there. If you come to one, I'll definitely make sure to hook up me in real life, as they say.
When is that? Is this year?
That's a good question. It's usually in the summer.
Yeah, which isn't bad.
Yes, I want to say it's usually near the middle of summer, end of summer. June 3rd and 4th is what it's saying here.
June 3rd and 4th, huh?
Yeah. So,
could be.
Yeah, that'd be sweet. It'd be awesome to see you there, and you'd be a great guest for sure. But yeah, I remember one time I was looking at some poster, and I was like, oh, I'll get Nick to sign this. And then I talked to him. I was like, hey, I got one of these posters, some of your art. I thought to sign it. I have some of his art here. Actually, I have one of his original pages of Army of Darkness from.
Oh wow!
Yeah, he was selling them at his table one time. And,
oh sure.
Yeah. So anyway, he and then he was like, oh, actually, that's an Art Adams one. And I was like, oh shit, he's right. Like, I just glanced at it, and I was like, oh, this is Nick. And then I looked at it later when he said that. I was like, oh shit, yeah, no, you're totally right. It is. I'm sorry, dude. I felt so terrible. But and he goes, no, it's cool. He goes, like, he's a big influence on my art style, and you can definitely see it. Yeah. So you can definitely.
What's interesting is Nick does this course before we moved over here to Ottawa in 2013, and then it was 2015 when I got the teaching job. I had gone to a meeting of a group of, or an illustrator group. It's like a meetup kind of thing where people could just get together and shoot the breeze. It was called Pens and Pixels. And so I was asked through Rob Spittle, who was running the comic shop at the time downtown here. I met him, because we came to town and I went to a couple of comic stores. So he recommended me to go and speak to the bunch. So just before me was the coordinator from our Algonquin program, Fred Sebastian. So after that meeting, he approached me and said, I'm putting together this new program at Algonquin. Would you like to teach there? So, boom, that was
Yeah,
good. But again,
amazing.
I just kind of, well, so I have to thank, I had to thank Rob for sending me there, but I didn't know anybody else. Anyway, yeah, so that was, so getting back to the, geez, there's so much we can go on about, but,
So you, at this point, I think you'd
but
move back to Montreal from Marvel. So you're still working for Marvel. You're just doing it based in Montreal now.
yeah, then I just worked from there, and I had steady work. I mean, I was working on regular titles, and then they would throw me extra stuff, fill-ins and what have you.
Do you have a favorite book at that time that you're working on, like throughout your career at Marvel?
Well, I always loved doing any of the Conan stuff.
Mhm.
It was fascinating. Oh, when I got asked to ink the Nom, I was going, this was big, and I'm going, oh, I love Michael Golden.
Mhm.
No, we got this other guy, Wayne Van Sant's going to draw it now. Who's that?
Yeah.
So, and so then Larry just says, well, this guy Wayne, he loves drawing tanks and he loves drawing the equipment, but his people are a little wonky. Your job is to fix them. Fix them, which is funny because so often inkers are told, don't mess with the pencils, just
Yeah.
ink what you see. In this case, it was like, I know you can draw now, I know you can draw. Fix the guy's drawing because it looks kind of amateurish, but his storytelling was really good. See, that was his plus. The page layouts, the storytelling, and he loved drawing all the tanks and all the equipment, which was great. So it worked out quite well. But after I did that a couple of years, I was thinking, I got to get out from just fixing Wayne's drawings all the time. He's a really nice fellow. I like him and everything, but I
Yeah.
got to do something else. But so then I was able to migrate over and the Conan the Barbarian series over Val Semix, who had like a Barry Windsor Smith kind of feel
Yep.
to his drawing. And then eventually I was able to get into more and more penciling. And then when the Doctor Strange became after I asked to draw that book, which was one of the few titles I really went after.
Mm-hmm.
And then after I was doing that a while, but could you switch to Namor? It was the same editor, Rockwitz. Can you switch to her? And I thought, well, Submariner, it's like not necessarily my favorite character, but yeah, I'll do it. What the hell, And Suicide Squad, I drew I had gone to DC right when I finished. I think it was Conan the King. Was Jim Owsley, who is now Christopher Priest. He changed his name. He had gone over to DC and then recommended me over there because I said I didn't have anything lined up at Marvel right away. So
Was there a
Jeff
lot of
asked,
was it sort of like, I was just curious about that environment because I noticed a lot of artists have done that over the years. Obviously, you go back and forth where the work is, but is it almost like, would Marvel see that as a betrayal if you just suddenly start working for DC? Did they care, or was it like
it was a good idea. In
yeah,
fact, in retrospect, find out it's a good idea because you could seem to say I'm loyal to one company,
mm-hmm.
and your page rate kind of just floats along.
Mm-hmm.
Then you go work for the other guys and says, well, we'll give you an extra $10, $20 a page. Oh, it goes up.
Yeah.
Then you go back to Marvel and says, what are they paying you? Well, they're paying me this. Oh, well, we'll put it up higher.
Yeah.
So in fact, it's better for you
but
not
so
to be so loyal.
Marvel, both companies knew you're freelancers. They didn't. It wasn't about that so much. Just about
they didn't care.
Getting the books out. That's all they really cared about. Okay.
And the funny thing is, after I did Suicide Squad for a bit over 2 years, and Harley Quinn.
Who was writing that? Who was writing that at the time?
Harley Quinn had not been invented yet, which much to my, otherwise it would have, people would have read the series, but nevertheless, I went back to Marvel and I talked to Ralph Macchio, and he goes, "Hey Jeff, you should have come to me because of course we would have had work for you." Yeah, I remember back then talking to all these people. No. And Ralph was editing group editor on the Spider-Man books, and I did a handful of Spider-Man things over the years, but because he'd been my favorite character growing up, I just never could crack the lineup to work on it regularly. But then again, you see who they had working for them, and they didn't have any real reason to change. So,
at what point was who was doing it at that point? Who was?
Well, it had Friends and Bagley and
Bagley, okay.
And
Was that when like
Steve
Tom
Scrooge.
Lyle and Sal Buscema? No, Sal Buscema was way before that. Was that like when it was Tom Lyle and Bagley? I remember because I was a big Spider-Man fan around that like my whole life. But at that time in comics, there was like 4 Spider-Man books all running
Yeah.
at the same time.
And Romita Jr. was doing stuff for a while. Then I
Right.
guess he went to X-Men, and then also, like I said, Steve Scrooge was doing it,
Yeah. Okay.
doing a really good job. And but there were a whole bunch of artists across 15 years or something. But I also had met with Bob Harris a few times trying. I did a couple of small X-Men or X Factor kind of things, and New Mutants fill in once, but I couldn't crack the X lineup at all either. They didn't see me as that because I was trying to focus on the storytelling and just doing good solid drawing, but I wasn't flashy that way.
Mm.
And so I probably didn't seem that exciting, in terms. When I got to Namor, I was probably drawing my best superhero style stuff, and I was really trying to push some of that kind of fun, more of that fun look to it. And I think that succeeded reasonably well. But again, there are personal relationships to get developed too, of course, and so you get to know certain people, and you often tend to stick with them until they rub you the wrong way.
Yeah.
And so I also tended to work for a handful of editors. I didn't go see everybody at Marvel. There were a lot of editors I never met, or I might see in passing, but I wasn't going around bugging people for work all the time. So I wasn't on their radar per se. That there's that too. So a whole bunch of things combined. I wasn't as forthcoming about. It's funny that I stuck my nose out to go into the office in the first place, but once I got work, I tended to be loyal and think to be loyal and stick with people I was working with already. And I still kind of feel that way, but at the same time, I know sometimes you just have to go another direction.
Yeah. I mean, you can be loyal to someone, doesn't necessarily mean they're loyal to you. And that's a hard lesson to learn, but it happens.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, well, okay. So, and that's carried you through mostly, but
well, it worked until the end of the 90s, and then I was working on the Marvel. They were down to 3-issue series as Joe André was editing those, and then Marvel dropped the license. So that was it for me. I wasn't able to get anything else, and so I had to think fast. What am I going to do now? But the film business was picking up in Montreal, so I had, again, not knowing anybody in the film business at all, I was able to find, and I heard Battlefield Earth was being made, so of course, we know how it turned out.
What a first movie to be involved in, my God.
Yeah, you might say that, however.
Well, for you, I'm sure it was great, but, it's just funny that, as time goes on, how it's looked back upon.
Well, at the time, I could see trouble on the horizon, even though I knew nothing about movies. As John Travolta's baby, as it were, right? Because he's the Scientologist and
so were you
book.
when you got into it? Were you just hired right off the get go as oh man, my brain stopped working. Storyboard artist? Yeah, was that the first go?
No, in fact, what happened was it took me a while to find the production office. So a matter of time, it was kind of fluky. And so I did find out who the art director was, and I sent him a message but got no answer. And so I kept digging. And then I finally got a hold of the production coordinator for the art department, and she says that, our production designer, now the step up from that, right? He's interviewing some artist for concept art. I said, well, what about storyboards? Oh, we have somebody doing that already. He needs concept art. So I went in to meet Patrick Tatopoulos. Now, he had done Independence Day, and he had done the revised Godzilla, because he had more of the sleeker head, that one.
I actually like that design. A lot of people shit on that movie. It wasn't that great of a movie, but I thought Godzilla looked pretty cool. Like, I like, yeah.
And Independence Day looked really good. So
the aliens
that
in the
was
ships
him.
was great. Yeah,
that was Patrick, cool. Because unlike a lot of production designers, and you may have seen over the years, he's a lot of them don't really do much drawing,
Hmm.
but he was also an illustrator himself. So um, I took in and I said, and he was over 2 days, he was interviewing 6 different local artists. And there are some very good people in Montreal. A couple of guys I even went to university with were doing this. Um, and then I went in and I said, I've got some comics here. I've never worked in movies, but here, and then so I had brought comics where I had to do design work, like, for whatever, whatever it was. And he just goes, I love you comic people. You can draw anything. This is great. And so, interesting fellow. He's a Greek name. He's from France, but he lived in California.
Hmm.
He's a long hair, really swinging, hip-looking guy. Very successful.
Had it all figured out.
Yeah, I love you guys. You can draw anything. And he goes, this is great. He goes, this movie, I got to do the sets, I got to do props, I got to do the costume. It's too much for me to draw everything.
Yeah.
I need somebody who can draw all this. You're hired.
Wow.
Bang.
Yeah, no negotiation even. Just that you're in. Nice.
Yeah. So, bang, that was it. It was great. So I said, and I'm thinking, well, I've been working in comics 20 years, just should snap my fingers and wander into this job, and I got it, baby.
Wow.
But who knows, right? So that's but anyway, I did get the job. So I was designing all kinds of stuff, set backgrounds, set decorations, and this, that, and the other, and costume details, and all kinds of stuff.
So like the look of the aliens and that and all that stuff, is that already like figured out before you come along, or?
Kind of, and a lot of it was Forrest Whitaker and Travolta, who looked still pretty much like themselves with some kind of crazy hair. And I was looking at it and these awful dreadlocks, and I'm going, the idea is Travolta wants you to know it's still him.
Yeah. What if Travolta was a predator is what I looked at when I saw that design. It's like,
Saturday Night Fever. But anyway, and the funny thing is, I'm drawing, and he comes to he was in Hollywood for a long time, and he finally came up to before they were going to start shooting. And so I had, I hardly said 2 words to the guy. He came around and, he came around to the art department. He's looking around, look at that, very nice. And I was going to give him a little background. It's like, well, we're designing this, and you're going to like that. And it's like he just kind of glanced at it and kept on, and I realized he's not really that interested in this.
No. He just wants you to see that to seem like he cares.
He didn't even, he just looked at it. Oh, very nice. He probably didn't remember any of it. And then there was a time there I had to do something with the costume, so I was told to go to the costume designer shop, where he showed up with his 12 sycophants, all fawning and laughing at anything he said. And yet,
man.
And I'm going, wow, this is really Hollywood, man.
Wow.
It's here. It's invaded here. Now, the funny thing is, the local, and you probably found here too when working on stuff, the local film people, the Montreal crew, are very down to earth, like regular.
Those Scotia people are super cool, down to earth. Awesome.
But the people from out there, it's a whole different ball of wax, because it's so much about image and perception, and a star is this big, but the producer has to keep putting them down because the producer has to let them know the producer is even bigger.
Yeah.
It's the ego thing. It's crazy.
Especially because like that movie alone, like if you do even a rudimentary dive into the production and all the stuff that went into, and I mean, you were there, so like to get into a movie that was so huge, it was like, I mean, I think industry wise, one of the biggest box office failures of all time. Like the amount that went into it and then what came out of it, it's such an interesting story. So I mean, to see all of that Hollywood kind of shitting all over that stuff when they're trying to do that, and especially you guys, like the poor artist is trying to make a nice looking picture, and then where the two meet. It's such a
they brought a set designer from England who decided it was kind of pre 3D. He was going to build a city. They were building a city in this big, like 20-foot square, giant plywood. They had all this stuff going. Apparently, at one point, it caught on fire and it was ruined.
Oh man! Oh man.
And this fellow didn't know where to get materials locally, so he had them sent from England on the shipping container at much more expense because he knew where he could get what he wanted. He didn't know locally, right?
Jeez.
Bill Pearson was his name too. Talk about a funny guy. He was great fun. He would come in. He would kind of come in and wander into the art department and his stories and
Wow.
kind of half drunk seeming, but not really. And I don't know. He was the personalities you meet, whatever. And then Patrick, apparently he was out superbike racing. He liked doing superbike racing, and he was warned you're not allowed to do this. So he goes back and he's going, "Don't tell anybody, but I went back to California. I had a superbike race and I crashed." He goes, "Well, my rib broke in, but don't say anything to anybody." So I'm not really up to doing much of the drawing. You got to do more this week. Okay, buddy.
Yeah,
Not a word, not a word. So anyway,
that's lovely.
but the thing with that movie was Roger Christian was directing, right? And he was second unit director in Star Wars. Roger, British fellow, terrific, really nice guy. Again, I didn't hardly ever talk to him, but I really liked him. He wanted the best. He wanted to do the right thing. He was trying to make a really good movie, right? Full credit to him.
Mm-hmm.
But Travolta and Jonathan Crane, his producer buddy from Scientology, were trying to bring Roger into the Scientology fold, so they hired him on to do this movie as kind of a lure, I think. And the funny thing, and again, I had never been on a movie set, but here I am at the spaceship for the Cyclos for Travolta and Forrest Whitaker, and okay, action. They'd sit there, do their dialogue bit, whatever. They'd do the scene, okay, and cut. Both of them, or Travolta, looked not at Roger. He looked at Crane and the other three producers that were all the Scientology gang to see if they liked it.
Oh, wow.
And when I thought, again, knowing nothing about filmmaking, like, he's not checking with the director. That's a bad sign.
Yeah. Wow. So you can see the writing on the wall.
Right from there, I said, uh-oh, this thing is going nowhere fast. And then, geez, again, I spent relatively little time on a set compared to, art department's pre-production.
Yeah.
Same with X-Men movies and whatever. That was much more instructive. Watching Bryan Singer direct a couple of scenes.
Yeah.
I had designed the katana for Psylocke, and for it was Age of Apocalypse.
A friend of mine worked on that too. He's special effects artist here in Nova Scotia. He did some of the Egyptian stuff.
Yeah. I designed a lot of that stuff.
Oh, really? Yeah.
He's some bits and pieces thereof. And then anyway, so when the sword was made, my prop master Claire, she said, "Hey, you want to go and see the sword?" And I said, "Well, where?" And I went to the office. No, they're filming with it today. They're over there. So there was Oscar Isaac as Apocalypse, and then the other four, Olivia Munn as Psylocke, and then the Storm, Angel, and of course Magneto, who's
Fassbender.
Fassbender.
Michael Fassbender.
That was fascinating to watch.
Yeah, that would be super cool to see. I mean, I know that movie isn't particularly well loved. I thought it was all right, but it's just like the effects wise, beautiful. And I mean, in the scope of the talent too.
But how he was, this one scene was in the corridor as they're about to go into a Cerebro.
Mm-hmm.
And Oscar, they don't say anything. Oscar just turns around and goes, "All shall be revealed soon, my children." This was his line.
Mm-hmm.
But Singer had him do this like 20 times. But every time it's not that he ever did it wrong.
Mm-hmm.
But he would go, "All shall be revealed soon, my children." He goes, "Can you do that 15% slower?" "All shall be revealed soon, my children." He goes, "Okay, this time, camera, can you wait until he turns before you start dollying in?" It's like slightly different ways of filming the whole thing. And then I realized, he wants to have lots of options. So when it comes time to edit the thing, he's going to get it exactly the way he wants. And I thought, that was a good lesson to learn. That was fascinating.
It's funny you can do that now, because back in the day of like when you had physical film, it'd be, miles and miles of film to film your movie. You had a limited amount of time you could record on film. So now with the digital age, you can get away with that, which is lovely, because you can get better performances and way more things and options, and have lots of options when it comes to the editing process. So it's super cool.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen stuff where they do 3 takes, bang, keep going,
Yeah.
But but that was interesting to see how he was doing that, and of course, the thing with the actors was funny because in between shots or takes, you know, uh, Olivia would be standing there going, and we're going, and Sarah's going, "How did you like it? The way she looks?" I said, "Oh man, it's freaking fantastic, amazing,
Yeah.
to see in real life the character
Yeah.
they're doing." But in between takes, he's like, "Ah," and then Alexandra Shipp as Storm would say, just a minute," and she like, your sword's hanging the wrong way. I gotta turn it this way, and there's stretching, and the entire time, Fassbender was standing up like this.
That Irish efficiency.
But he was in character as Magneto.
Oh yeah.
And he was staying in character the whole time. I am Magneto.
Yeah, I love his version of that character.
It was
Was fantastic.
great. It's just like this guy is playing the part the whole time, and the rest are like, yeah.
What sold me on him, I think, was in First Class, is that scene where he goes into the bar and he's talking to those former Nazis that are like hiding out and whatever. And and the guy says he's a fishmonger and he's whatever. And then he says, he's like, "Oh, my family was killed by fishmongers and the other guy." And then they kind of realize the connection, and then he uses his powers to fuck him up. But man, he's such a good actor, and he brought a really cool, different dynamic to that role.
But that's the funny thing. Turn the camera off.
Yeah,
he didn't.
He
turn
holds it.
off.
Yeah, some
And
people
I
do.
thought,
Some people do that. They're really, that's their process. I never really got it. I do stage acting too, and like I'm just once you're out of scene, I'm back to being myself. But some people, it's easier for them. They can really stay in it. I don't find it that easy.
Well, he just had to stand around and look imperious, which of course is fun.
That is true. Yeah, it's true.
It's always better to play the villain, right?
Oh, for fun, I've always wanted to play like just an irredeemable monster of a villain. I haven't had a chance yet, so.
Nobody's going to buy it.
I've built my whole life trying to look more evil. No, I'm kidding. But that's the way I'm going. I'm actually working on hopefully doing a stage play version of Frankenstein soon. So I might be playing the monster in it, which it's more of an adaptation of the book. So the creature himself is complicated, and it's a very, very faithful adaptation of the novel. So you get more than just. He's not just a monster. There's a lot of layers,
No.
but these deep conversations about existentialism and life and what it means in creation. So it's very interesting, but it's the closest I'm getting if I get to do that I've got to that yet. So someday, hopefully, I'll get to. But that's very cool. So you worked with Aronofsky too, who I'm a huge fan of his films. What was that like?
That was good because on The Fountain, he says, "Well, I'm giving you." Now, this is one time I had super specific storyboards to do because he had it all figured out ahead of time.
Mm-hmm.
He says, "I'm shooting." He says, "There's a lot of religious Catholic symbology here, so I'm going to shoot north, south, east, west." Like the
cross. Yeah.
And so, good. Okay, fine. So what he would give me diagrams, of like a floor plan, and actors here, actor here, cameras. He gave me every single shot he wanted, and I just had to visualize what he had. Whereas others, they say, well, here's like on X-Men, the Quicksilver scene where he's in slow motion.
Yeah.
Where they have like the 2001 takeoff where he's fighting these guys.
Was that so you worked on Age of Apocalypse?
Yes.
That was
and Days of Future Past, both.
Oh, okay. So both, because he had scenes in both those movies where he was doing that.
So it was the one with, I think it was Days of Future Past that I
did
a lot. I worked more on that actually.
Cool. I love Quicksilver. He's one of my favorite.
I was told I was working with more with Brian Smurs, who was the second unit guy handling the action and fight scenes primarily. Yep. And of course, then there was also 3D previs and all this before filming. Everything had to be completely worked out because every shot was composited with like maybe 3 to 5 different layers of stuff going on. So you can't wing that stuff. You have to have it figured out exactly, precisely, right? So I was working with him on a lot of that, and then we got to the part with when they started filming. He says, "Here are all the scenes with Quicksilver." I mean, he says, "I know Brian's going to rewrite this stuff. It's kind of like a parcel script. It's not." And the stuff with him, he's a tinkers with everything, or so you never know. But said, just draw me all the scenes with Quicksilver, and then we'll just use that as a jumping off point. So that was a case where it's like, here's a bunch of stuff, just make it up. And I thought, well, that's easy for me. I'm used to doing this all the time.
Yeah.
As opposed to Darren, this is exactly what I want. Just draw what I thought, which was actually very easy because I didn't have to make it up.
Yeah.
I didn't care one way or the other.
He seems like a very meticulous. I mean,
He's good too.
I'm a big movie guy. I always have been, but I do a lot of gigs, as you probably have learned from us talking. And one of them is I'm also a professional wrestler, so I wrestle and stuff around the area.
It was amazing.
I know. So that movie brought him to my attention, and then I kind of went back on everything. And man, I just deeply that in that movie, people ask me about that. If like, is that movie accurate? And I'm like, yes and no. Like, I mean, they really focus on the saddest parts of it, but there are people out there that just can't let go and are still, still holding on that shouldn't be. And it did a really good job of like the way all the behind the scenes stuff in wrestling, they nailed all that perfect. Talking to people what you're going to do. Like it was very good. But I said they definitely focused on the sadder part, but I think wrestling's just a vehicle to show someone that once had fame and can't let it go. And that,
the funny thing is, I've seen, the scene where the guys are sitting around at the convention kind of thing, and they're just hanging out, trying to, like nobody's coming to see them or anything.
Yeah.
I mean, I've seen that in real life.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah. No. Yeah.
Like some of the Quebec shows, they have wrestlers also, the Honky Tonk Man and these guys, and they're just sitting around like, what are we doing here?
I've been on shows with them too. Honky Tonk Man before, and I've wrestled a few of the older guys as well back in the day. And it
was a Greg the Hammer
Valentine. Yeah.
Valentine. It was I was in a car ride with him from Denver up to Cheyenne, Wyoming. Was the first show they had there. So we flew in at the same time. So we took a ride with the guy. That was fun listening to him for about an hour and a half.
How did that come about? Like, why were you traveling with him?
Oh, we're going to the convention.
Oh, for the convention. Okay, yeah. All right.
Yeah. They wouldn't fly. The cost to fly to Cheyenne is a short hop after Denver costs about twice as much. So
So
they just fly to Denver, and then they just picked it up and drove.
Oh yeah, no. Listen to stories from more wrestlers is a hoot. I traveled a lot with Hacksaw Jim Duggan across Newfoundland wrestling, and just listen to his stories is hilarious.
These guys are nuts. Yeah, it's really something else.
Yeah.
And I looked at his hands and I said, he's got these big meat hooks, and I'm thinking, and the guy's older by then, right? So it's like, he says, well, I grew up in wrestling. My father was wrestling, and it's like, that was that's always been his world. It's as interesting as that kind of certain bubble. And he goes, well, what about injuries? He goes, no, I never got hurt. I knew we knew what we were doing, and I didn't get hurt. He says some of the amateur guys would come in and they would do some stupid stuff because they didn't know how to fall and know how to work things. And some of these guys would get really mashed up. But, we knew what we were doing, so we had it worked out.
There's a style of wrestling you can do that's, a lot safer than others. And fortunately, the modern way has become a lot more almost like stunt work with a lot of flippy and crazy, dangerous stuff, which, it's always amping up, and it makes me wonder where it's going to end. Like how much do people have to, and some of these young guys have short careers because they're doing, 6 backflips off the top rope. And if you don't land it right every time, your career gets a lot shorter. So. Yeah,
but there's no blood.
Yeah.
You can't have blood anymore.
No, not on WWE. They usually stop the match, and because they're really tool their product to be kind of all ages. So they've gotten away from that.
Yeah, so it's like more like superhero stuff, and it's more fantasy world, and then of course 80% of us are standing there barking at each other. Come on.
Oh yeah. Well, it's funny because I always equate when people ask me,
and all this.
When people ask me about wrestling, I always say, I was always a comic book fan as a kid, and wrestling to me is a real life comic book. You got, good guys have their moves, which are like their powers. Bad guys have their moves, which are like their powers. They have colorful costumes and personalities, and it really felt like and it still does to me to an extent, When they try to make it more like realism is when I get away from it a little bit. Like I totally understand it, but it does feel a little different.
Then the popular ones wind up acting in the end.
Yeah, they do, and some of them are great actors.
Yeah.
I've been watching the Peacemaker show, the spinoff from the Suicide Squad movie with John Cena. And
I hear he's doing well. I haven't seen that, but we don't.
Did you see the film, the James Gunn movie?
No, I haven't been to a movie theater in a couple of years since COVID. Have not been, just period. We just stayed away. Still, we're home almost all the time. We have our local bubble is Ron Sutton and Janet Hetherington. Famous of Elvira fame for anybody that doesn't know. And Janet wrote that title for a long time. And right now, Ron's done for the Edgar Rice Burroughs website. He did the Burroughs series about a lion called The Man Eater, and now he's been working on Carson of Venus for some 60 odd weeks or whatever. So that's what he's doing regularly.
Wow.
And so, he'd be fun to talk to because
I would love to talk to him. Absolutely.
Yeah, we get together, like maybe every 3 weeks, every month or so.
Mm-hmm.
And he and their family are all Toronto, mine are in Montreal, and Amanda's are over in Nova Scotia. So, we're kind of our little group, and we still are home all the time. I teach on Zoom. Amanda's, she's been able to work from home for a while, but not for too much longer. But she's waiting to see how that goes. So we're,
good.
We're triple vaccinated and have not gotten sick yet, and I'm 61 now, so we're kind of careful with that, trying not to run around with all the kids,
Yeah, no, that's you have any children? I forgot to ask that, of course.
I have a stepson who's lives in PEI with his father.
Oh, very nice.
So Amanda and her ex had separated quite a number of years, like 10 years before I met her. So,
and you two are married for how long now?
10 years,
nice.
10 and a half. And my first wife passed away of cancer in 2009. So that's been a while. So she's my second marriage, but not by choice. I mean, in that way.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, no, it's a difficult situation, but
it's funny how to talk. I mean, of course, things happen in life all over the place, but I was never somebody who had gotten divorced, and so I never have had that kind of acrimonious experience like so many others have.
Yeah.
And so now, I was widowed, and so, met Amanda after, and even that was a situation that, I was at a point where I was like, I don't know who the heck I'm ever going to meet. I'm not worried about it. At this point, I'd kind of given up on the whole idea. But, we hit it off really well after we met, both from a kind of maritime background, with her from way down Pubnico way, and me from the Chesapeake Bay. So we had the maritime life connection kind of thing. And, it worked out really well. We just hit it off right away. And she's not a comic book person. It's not her thing. She thought it was kind of an odd thing, but she loves going to conventions with me, and she loves doing all that, meeting the people and doing all that thing. So
that's lovely.
We've kind of missed that for the last couple of years.
Yeah, it has been a rough go for sure. As far as that stuff.
I can announce though that I am now going to Calgary end of was it April 21st to 4th or something like that. So I am now set for the Calgary Fan Expo and back to Toronto again in August. So those two are set.
Okay, excellent.
And I don't know. I'm also looks like heading down to Dallas in November. Our one problem, of course, the main thing with traveling outside Canada now is having to get these molecular tests.
The rapid tests?
Not the rapid test, the molecular one, like the NAAT or one of the other
ones.
Yeah,
I haven't traveled outside Nova Scotia, just like the PEI or New Brunswick or something a little bit since it started, but our numbers have been pretty low until recently with the new Omicron stuff. But so I haven't had that experience. Just the rapid test. In fact, I just did one because my wife's birthday is yesterday, and some friends of ours who have a baby that we haven't seen much lately because they're are coming over, so they asked if we could do one. So I said sure. My wife's works from home, so hasn't really left, but I'm the only one who's out in the world because I have to be. So
Yeah.
but it's negative, so I managed to stay COVID free so far. So
That's good. Yeah.
yeah,
So that's the thing. We can travel and fly even inside Canada, and you just have to show your vaccination records,
yep.
and I guess they take your temperature or something. But to go to the U.S., you need
Mm.
these molecular tests within 24 hours, which is tough because that's barely squeaking by.
Hmm.
Plus, they cost like $200 each.
Oh, really? I didn't know
So
that.
if we
Wow.
want to do this both directions, to fly to U.S. and come back, that's $800 we have to spend on tests. So
Wow.
I'm thinking by later in this year, maybe they'll eventually drop that. If the
Yeah, we'll
situation.
see. Things are really weird right now. So
So that's now, but I'm thinking November. So maybe
yeah,
maybe by then things will have calmed down enough.
yeah,
We can do that. But otherwise, no. So I have, like I said, Calgary and Toronto, and of course we have the show here in Ottawa where I live. We have that one in September, and then again, there's always Moncton, right?
that's right. Maybe we'll see you out here. That'd be amazing.
Well,
I get to meet you in
have to
person
talk to them.
for sure. Well, I'm sure Nick would be happy to have you out here. That's for sure. So yeah, I can't thank you enough, Jeff. Is there anything else I missed about you want to cover? Or?
Well, right now I am working on this graphic novel called Toby's War with writer Keith Davidson. Now he hasn't worked in comics before. He's more of a film person, and so film script writer and what have you. So it's a story set originally in World War II, where a boy, and there's this Narnia-esque feel where he winds up going through a portal to this other world, and instead of the Narnia world, now it's populated by these kind of miscreant, hungry, zombie-esque type creatures,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm playing them a little bit sympathetic because they're really pathetic types.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the head of them is evil, and of course he's the bad guy and all this.
Yeah.
But I'm also the way I'm drawing them now. I'm seeing them as like it's not their fault. They were grown. They were
Yeah.
born as these kind of
Yeah.
mutant freaks or whatever. But so at the same. So anyway, there's a lot of stuff going on here. I really like the emotional content, the character building in this story, and just as I'm just drawing along, trying to get it finished.
Wow.
Well, right now, so we are working with Andy Schmidt, who's with Comics Experience. So he has been an editor, Marvel or DC, I think maybe DC, I'm not sure. He's done that job, so he's now running as the editor, and so now it's getting getting a little more organized. I'm a little past halfway drawing this 200-page story, which I'm trying to get finished by fall, maybe if I
Mhm.
can. And Laverne Kinzierski is doing the coloring, so he's just started to send in a couple of pages of coloring. So that's really fun. I worked with him on Renegade Media's Necromantic. This was a 4-issue series that Dave Ross penciled or did the art for the first 3 issues, and I drew the 4th, and Laverne wrote that series.
Oh wow.
And then he wound up. They had another colorist, but he wound up coloring the story I did as well, which is kind of fun. So we get to write it and then color his own story.
That's cool.
And so so he was brought in. I didn't recommend him specifically because I don't really not my job to do that. But
Yeah.
anyway, he's doing it, which is great. And Pat Brasso is going to be the letterer, who I did recommend. He was lettering Doctor Strange when I was doing it. So we've maintained a friendship over the years. And anytime I'm drawing a story, I try and see if I can get him to do the lettering. So
you did figure out networking.
Yeah, well, I mean, since
Yeah.
and of course since then, now it matters a lot, and of
it
course,
really does.
no, but it's been that way for years. Once you get established, so often you get asked to do work and you don't have time. You say, well, I got somebody for you.
Mhm.
I can ask. You ask somebody, and now since I've been teaching, now we have alumni from our program that I've been able to recommend here and there for jobs. Not a lot, because Ottawa's a big animation hub. There are like 7 animation houses here, and a lot of people go in that direction. But for other kind of stuff and for some film things, I have been able to bring in a few of our alumni, some of the better ones, in to do some, work with me on some jobs,
Oh,
and
excellent.
also, or just, get them started somewhere else, and that might help them. And even for myself, I had a whole bunch of posters because I was doing a Facebook Live drawing show this past, like about a year ago, up until, I did that for a few months. And so I was doing drawings during that, which I hit with ink and then pencil and ink, and then I had sold those, but I'd scanned them. So I had 6 of my grads from this past summer do the coloring,
Oh, wow.
because I didn't have time. I've been working on the story, so they did a terrific job. So that was so I was able to give them a little bit of coloring work and to help them along the way. And they, one fellow, he graduated within 2 weeks. He was already working for a video game company and things like that. So
Fantastic. Good.
it's it's great to pass along any drawing knowledge that I have to them. I don't care about, I'm not trying to hold anything back or whatever.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter. I'm
Oh.
always busy anyway. And so a lot of them are kind of surprised by the information they get, but also from the rest of our staff, who are all very good. Everybody is, Fred Sebastian's put together a terrific team. So I think that, we have, again, it's a difficult program to get in, because I think we accept about like 40 students per year, and we get about 300 submissions.
Oh, wow.
So it's not easy to get into, but at the same time, those that do are really want to make a career of it, which we all understand because we've been there. And so, I'm giving them information, again, they probably never expected. They're going to get stuff that nobody on a YouTube video is not going to show them, things like
I love
that.
this new model of education when it comes to like art stuff, that there really are industry people that have really made something of themselves that are teaching it now. And it's such a benefit to the students. It's amazing. And I'm sure they're getting a top-notch influence from you as well. So that's awesome.
Yeah, there are a lot of our fantastic artists that are not really interested in teaching and this, that, and the other. It's been in my family, like as I mentioned earlier. My father taught at McGill for 25 years, and my relatives or grandparents, they were taught in high school and this, that, and the other. It was always a big part of our family growing up. So I just kind of fall into it naturally, and it's why for example, I'm even able to speak with you fairly well, because I'm been used to yakking to my class for 7 years. Get in there and go, I got 4 hours, dead, especially on Zoom, you don't like dead space, right?
No, absolutely not. Dead air. Yeah.
Dead air,
for sure.
No silent, okay, they're going to start drawing and say, okay, kids, I'm going to put mute on. I'm going to shut up and let you draw. But after 3 minutes, I'm thinking, oh yeah, don't forget to do this. Don't forget that.
That's awesome, man. Well, thank you so much, Jeff, for being on the show. It's been a real honor talking to you, man. I've always been a fan of your work, and it was really great to talk to you. And hopefully I'll get to see you at East Coast Comic Expo sometime soon. Yeah,
we'll do that when we can. We'll again have to see how we can swing that, but it would be great too. And fantastic.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Okay.
Have a good day.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
See ya.
And there it is, my talk with Geof Isherwood. Thank you very much to Jeff for being my guest, and big thanks to you for tuning in. Be sure to check me out as well on X-Rated, the X-Men Animated Review Show, which has live podcasts every Tuesday night, mostly every Tuesday night unless something comes up, but it's generally every Tuesday evening, 8 o'clock Atlantic Standard Time, in which we review every episode of the X-Men animated show from the 90s on Fox. Me and my co-host Davin Scalehorn have a lot of fun, and sometimes we have some guests, including previous guest of this show, David Cutler. Be sure to tune in 2 weeks' time for another featured interview. I'm not 100% sure who that is going to be yet. I had a few people lined up, and I'm just getting some things figured out. But I will certainly be announcing it on social media when I know. So tune in then. But in the meantime, stay safe, have fun, and I will see you next time.